I read part of your media advisory, and I read something that really caught my attention. It said that cardiovascular disease causes 10 times more fatalities in women than breast cancer.
Yes,
Is that true? I couldn't
the
believe it.
story, yeah, you're not alone.
I'm
Most
shocked.
people feel that way. And that's why we put that statistic in there. Most people, women included, you know, uh, I'm a big fan of the Susan G. Komen Foundation, the pink ribbon,
Right.
I really want to raise awareness, but they've done such a good job for awareness of breast cancer in women
Yes.
that, and the heart disease folks just maybe haven't done so good. And
Not at
like you
all.
said, 10 times the number of women are dying from heart disease than from breast cancer.
That is incredible to me, to hear that. But why is it so prevalent in women?
There's actually even more heart attacks that occur among women than men. Believe it or not, people don't believe that either. There's a few things that are unique about what's going on with women that make it more difficult. First of all, when you look at men and women, women tend to have their heart attacks in their 70s, whereas men tend to have theirs in their 50s and 60s.
Hmm.
So
Oh,
men and their heart attacks get more attention. The second thing is, if you actually look at, and they've looked at data on this as well. When women go into the ER with heart attacks, they tend to get missed. They tend to get sent home when they have a heart attack more than men. There's a couple of reasons for it. One of them is the thing that you and I just talked about and that you brought up. Women have far more heart attacks than people think. But there's another thing about women and their hearts that's very unique. They don't have the classic symptoms nearly as much as men. There's an elephant sitting on my chest. It's
right.
right here. It's going down my arm. No, women will often come in and say, I just feel sweaty all the time. I'm just sweating for the past 2 or 3 days. That's it.
Huh.
Or, I feel like I'm having my period. I feel kind of funny. Or I'm just feeling like I'm under a lot of stress. And so they get these things that they get diagnosed as mental health. It must be an anxiety. It must be that you're upset. And meanwhile, she's having a heart attack.
Huh. Unbelievable. That's one of the signs.
It really is.
One of the signs.
So one of the jobs, Jeannie in our group is going to be presenting some things about women's heart attack and heart health. And hey, be aware. Don't think that just because you're having a little bit of sweats that it's
Yeah.
that could be a heart attack.
It's good to
So
know. Energy.
when you got muscles like that, they'll just pull that sugar out of the blood and bypass these ailing insulin receptors.
Hmm.
So the more you can do to think about, okay, what gets me in good shape? And a lot of people think, oh, well, that means you want me to go run 4 miles. No, it doesn't mean that at all. In fact, they've done a lot of studies on that. Mayo up in Minnesota did some really good, interesting studies looking at the actual mitochondria and 20 and 30 somethings, 50 somethings, and 70 and 80 somethings, people those ages.
Yes.
And they did 3 types of workout. They did the old aerobic, run slowly for multiple miles. Then they did high intensity interval work.
Yes.
And then they did resistance training.
Hmm.
So yeah, the aerobics helped a little bit,
Yes.
but by far the most effective was the HIIT training, high intensity
High
interval work.
intensity. Really?
And resistance training was a close second. So
Okay.
one of the key things that we do is start educating our patients about, there's a lot of things that we need to be doing differently. Even when from the old health nut days, we used to say, don't eat any fats and go out and run 4 miles. And the problem is maybe a little bit different than we thought. And there's some very different kind of things. Number one, if you're like 90% of us and you can't metabolize all those carbs, you should rethink fats and oils. Those are probably better for you. And eating a lot of carbs is going to stimulate your insulin and decrease your ability to burn fat again.
Right.
So change your diet, adjust, know what you can metabolize safely. Know if you've got this public health problem, this prediabetes, diabetes. If you do, then manage it differently. And instead of just going out and spending hours running around the neighborhood, do some intensity work, do some resistance training, and do some high intensity interval training. And don't just work on your arms. The arms are great, but they're really, in our world and what we're doing, they're more cosmetic than anything else. It's the muscles of the leg, the hips, the thighs. You look at Arnold Schwarzenegger, he's got huge biceps.
Right.
But where's his real muscle mass?
Legs.
It's in his thighs, his calves, his hips.
Right.
And the reason that's important is because we want to use that muscle mass as that safety valve to pull that blood sugar when it's high back out of the blood and into the muscle where it's safe.
Nice. That's awesome. Great advice. And I believe in it tremendously, because in my world of fitness, we talk about strength training, high intensity interval training. So it's good to hear from you that this is one of the best types of exercises we can do to actually pull that sugar out into the muscle. So I'm definitely would like to share that to more people to let them know this is what you need to do, because this is a major problem today. I mean, on a major scale,
It's the number one cause of death.
Oh, unbelievable. And what
It's
you
also
do.
the number one cause of disability.
But most people believe, as you said earlier, once you get into your 50s, 60s, I always hear, well, I'm old now. I can't do what I used to do. So I'm gonna sit down, watch TV, and just drink loads of Coke all day. I mean, people give up. They say, what's the sense? I'm 55, 60. What's the point? And they just give up, and they get fatter, and they get sick, and they expect to get sick because they are getting older. How do you change that?
I used to have a coffee table book with a lot of pictures. It was called Growing Old. The title was Growing Old is Not for Sissies. And it was like this 80-year-old woman who took up powerlifting in her 70s.
Wow.
And, another 80-year-old woman who started swimming in their 60s and swam the English Channel. You remember that Mayo Clinic article that I talked about where they showed that resistance training and interval training was better?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
So you remember I said they did the 80-somethings and the 50-somethings and the 20 and 30-somethings?
Right.
Guess who grew the most mitochondria?
I would think the younger ones, because
we would all think that.
Sure.
But you know where I'm going with this.
I know where you're going.
The 80-something
really?
that grew the most mitochondria. And, when you think about it, there's another way of thinking about it. It's just what you talked about just a minute ago. Well, I get in my 50s, my 60s, my 70s. I think I'm old and I can't work out anymore. So I quit working out. Well, my muscles, that's atrophy. You know that space. Yes. And so then you go back and you think, well, what if instead of letting your muscles atrophy or shrink, you continue to push them even into your 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And sure enough, that's where you can get growth. Growing old's not for sissies. You have to work to get there.
I'm just going to write that down. I'm going to use that. Growing old is not for sissies.
That's right.
The next class, we'll talk about that.
There you go.
Well, this is